When we think about the universe, we usually think about what's out there, distant, above us. Galaxies, stars, space. But very few people stop and consider something quieter. That the universe might not just be out there, it might be here. Not in a mystical sense, in a structural one. Because there's something about reality that feels stable on the surface, but uncertain at the edges. Like it holds together until you look too closely. And the deeper physics goes, the stranger that feeling becomes. Because at the smaller scales we've been able to measure, the universe doesn't behave like a fixed thing. It behaves like possibility. A particle doesn't exist in one place. It exists as a range of potential states, a spread, until something interacts with it. And in that moment, everything narrows. Possibility becomes outcome. Physicists call this moment collapse. And for a while, it feels like we found the answer. Like this is the mechanism behind reality itself. The point where the universe becomes real. But collapse doesn't create structure, it reveals it. You can't collapse chaos, only pattern potential. And that's where the idea begins to shift. Because pattern collapse implies something deeper. Structure. Not rigid, not mechanical, but ordered enough to exist before it becomes visible. Which means collapse isn't where reality begins. It's where reality becomes accessible. And that is a very different thing. Because accessibility implies something was already there. Something waiting to be resolved. Waiting to be seen. And once you see it that way, reality starts to feel slightly different. Less like a finished world, and more like something being revealed. Layer by layer, moment by moment. And if collapse is the moment where reality becomes visible, then the real question isn't what collapse is. It's what kind of structure exists before collapse happens at all. Because if reality only becomes definite when it's observed, then reality doesn't begin when you see it. It begins for you. And that distinction isn't philosophical, it's structural. If collapse is the moment reality becomes visible, then something must exist before that visibility. Because collapse doesn't act on nothing. It acts on potential. And potential isn't random. It's structured. In modern physics, what we call particles aren't really tiny objects. They're disturbances in something deeper. Fields. Invisible fields that exist everywhere. Even in what we call empty space. But space isn't truly empty. It's active, restless, fluctuating with energy. And when something interacts with that field, a possibility becomes an outcome. A wave becomes a point. Collapse happens. But notice what that implies. The structure had to exist before it was revealed. The wave wasn't created in that moment. It was already there. Collapse didn't invent reality. It selected from it. And that small distinction changes everything. Because it suggests that the visible world is not the whole system. It's the surface. A layer where deeper structure becomes readable. We see hints of this everywhere in physics. Dark matter outweighs visible matter by more than 5 times. Something unseen is shaping galaxies, holding them together. But we can't observe it directly. Quantum fields fill all of space, yet they only become visible when they interact. Again and again, the pattern repeats. Structure first, visibility second. The deeper we look, the less reality behaves like a collection of objects, and the more it behaves like architecture. Layers of structure, becoming visible only when something interacts with them. Which means collapse may not be creating the world we experience, it may be translating it. The moment where a deeper layer of reality briefly becomes something we can perceive. And if that's true, then what we call reality might only be one layer, a surface we interact with, while something far more complex exists beneath it. But collapse might not be the strangest part of this idea. The strange part is that collapse implies something existed before it. And once you see that, it becomes harder to think of reality as a finished thing. It starts to feel more like a system. Something layered, something structured, something that doesn't fully reveal itself all at once. If reality becomes visible through collapse, and collapse depends on interaction, then observation isn't separate from reality. It's part of it. And that leads to something most people don't consider. We assume we all live in the same world, the same reality, the same set of facts. But what if shared reality was never guaranteed? What if it depended on something deeper? Alignment, coherence. Because collapse doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through interaction, through perception. And perception isn't identical across people. Every mind filters the world differently, through language, through attention, through the structure it uses to interpret what it sees. For most of history, those structures were similar enough that reality felt shared, stable, consistent. But something has changed. Information is fragmented. Attention has split. People are no longer looking at the same patterns. And when perception diverges, so does what gets resolved. This isn't just disagreement, it's something deeper. Different groups are collapsing different layers of meaning, different interpretations of the same underlying reality, which makes the world feel unstable. Not because reality itself is broken, but because coherence is weakened. We're no longer resolving the same patterns, and when that happens, shared reality begins to thin. Not disappear, just lose alignment. And what we experience as confusion or division might actually be something structural, a shift in how reality is being resolved. We're not just seeing different opinions, we may be seeing different realities. And if collapse depends on coherence, then coherence isn't just social, it's fundamental. It shapes the layer of reality we experience, which means the world we see isn't just out there, it's something being resolved through the way we perceive it. And if that's true, then the observer isn't outside the system, they're inside it, which raises a much more uncomfortable question. Up to this point, it sounds like collapse is something happening to reality. Something out there. Particles collapsing, waves becoming points, possibilities becoming outcomes. But collapse doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through interaction, through measurement, through observation. And that changes the frame completely. Because the observer isn't outside the system. The observer is part of it. Every moment of perception is an interaction with reality. A moment where something indefinite becomes definite, where possibility narrows into experience. Not everywhere. Here. For you. And that's where the distance disappears. Because if collapse reveals structure, then observation is part of that revelation. Not as something mystical, as something structural. The universe doesn't just exist, fully formed, independent of interaction. It becomes specific through it. And that means something subtle but important. The world you experience is not just sitting there waiting. It's being resolved in real time, through interaction, through perception, through awareness. Collapse doesn't happen around you. It happens through you. And once that lands, the idea shifts again. Because this isn't about changing reality. It's about participating in it. Every moment of awareness is a point of resolution. A place where one version of possibility becomes the experience you move through. Which means the world isn't just something you observe, it's something you are entangled with. Not metaphorically, structurally. And if that's true, then collapse isn't just a property of particles. It may be a property of how reality becomes visible at all. And if collapse depends on observers, and observers are part of the system, then collapse itself might not be the deepest layer. It might only be the surface of something much larger. At first, collapse looked like the mystery, the moment where possibilities become reality, where the universe seems to choose. But collapse doesn't create anything, it reveals, which means something had to exist before it was revealed. Structure, potential, patterns waiting to become visible. And that shifts the question. Because the mystery is no longer, why does reality collapse? The mystery becomes, why is there structure capable of collapsing at all? Why does the universe contain ordered potential? Why does possibility exist before it becomes experience? The deeper physics goes, the less the universe looks like a collection of things, and the more it looks like relationships, fields interacting with fields, structures nested inside structures, layers of reality only becoming visible when something interacts with them. Collapse may just be the moment where that hidden architecture becomes readable, a translation from possibility to experience. But collapse may not be the deepest layer. It may only be the doorway. And if that's true, then what we call reality might only be the surface, an interface, a boundary between structure and awareness. Which means the real question was never just what reality is. The real question is, what kind of universe allows something to become real? Only when it is experienced. Because if collapse is a doorway, then the mystery isn't the world we see. It's the architecture that allows it to be seen at all.